Hi everyone, and welcome to the Technical Steering Committee meeting for the 28th of May 2005. As we were just discussing, we have a number of apologies, including Ricky Rand, Matt Davis, Kevin Hammond, and Marcus Guffler, who will be joining us late, but we are quorate. Unfortunately, we don't have either our chair or our vice chair, so for the purposes of this week, do we want to, and keeping things by the book, do we want to nominate a chair quickly for this session?
Nominate Neil Davies.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Done.
As a full guy. Okay, you go.
Great.
Okay, let's take the any outstanding actions from last week that we haven't recorded or missing or.
Yeah, my apologies. I haven't copied and pasted that in ahead of the meeting, so we'll just have to do that on the fly. I think actually most of the things that we have are covered in the agenda anyway.
Since the next item is apologies, can I ask, did our message that we voted on last week go out to anyone?
Here we go.
I can remember which message, Ben.
The one about the.
Oh yes, okay.
Our opinion on who should hold the balance of the votes on the Treasury contracts.
Right.
Sure. I haven't shared that formally yet, but I can put that on my actions. What I had done is just loop it in with all the other opinions that have been shared on the TSC remit. But if we want to escalate that specifically, then I can add that.
Yeah, please do.
Please, yeah. I think there being no objections to that. Please, can you point it? It was intended to go to the ICC. Yes, Ben.
I believe I said the Intersect Steering Committee.
Okay, ISC.
And the board and anyone else. Like it is free to be shared with the other committees, as I expect some of the other committees at least will agree with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was any body at Intersect that's relevant, but specifically the board and the steering committee, the other chairs.
And it's ISC, Duncan, not ICC. That was a different discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello. Sorry for being late.
Sorry. We don't have our chair and vice chair and one other, so I got the short straw for today.
Could we zoom in on the other actions? I don't have my microscope with me.
That's
okay. Thank you.
So the CARES agent one we've already had apologies about. So we're going to push that one to next week. The second one we've just talked about. The third one is coming up in the agenda, two items, I think, on item 5. I can't.
This is item 4, which is the update on. Sorry, the terms of reference update. That's downstream of the TSC remit.
Okay.
Which we'll cover later. We're also going to cover the Thomas Linseth's suggestion on reducing the min committee size parameter. And finally, I was just going to add on, if we have time, to look back at the request from the ICC to review the Amaru proposal.
Yes. Do we put that at the bottom under any other business? Okay. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to suggest, but Sam not being here, we skip item 3 for the moment. Yes. Okay.
That is on me, but while we're at the to-dos from before, maybe we should talk about 5 first. Well, we could also just go line by line.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So what's going on here is that the community, specifically Steve from Rabbit Pool, reached out to me with my parameter committee head on and asked how they could best push an L parameter in the rewards fee.
This is actually for
formula.
question 4 then, actually, Duncan. This is for point 4. Just so could you remind me what the L parameter is, please?
Yes, absolutely. The L parameter is the either linear or exponential change in saturation depending on the pledge. So it's a factor within the rewards formula giving different outcomes. If you remember the parameter committee call that we had the previous time, they presented this little fancy website where all kinds of effects could be seen. Basically that. Now, usually my response to parameters would be go through the PCB process to demand or to ask for a formal response from the parameter committee. However, this is a new parameter, and the parameter committee specifically defined in its remit that it doesn't do new parameters, only existing ones.
So to clarify, this L parameter is not currently in the parameter set.
Correct.
Were it to, it actually is a parameter. The setting of this parameter is under the assumption that we're going to change from the current saturation mechanism to a new saturation mechanism.
And in this direction goes somewhat this request.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is the request about the parameter itself is, given that it would need a change to the system in order for that, i.e. a hard fork of some sort, to
exactly. Yes.
new parameter into the system. So,
yes.
So the initial request, are they looking for feedback on what I'm trying to work out? Are they looking for feedback about the hard forkness of it, or feedback about the parameter valueness of it?
They see the parameter to be valuable. So I think that question is answered from their perspective. How I saw the question is, how could they progress their idea into a round or into an alliance that is resulting in a fork that includes their proposal. Considering that you need to, the consensus team needs to be in there, node team, now multiple node teams need to somewhat agree on that. It's not only about opinions, what do we think as TSC or as technical experts, it also is about the actual process of pushing that to a state where you can't even start with that. And I also didn't know the answer.
Duncan, do you?
Can I just clarify what the status of this is? We're talking about a proposal, right? A proposal for changing the reward formula in a hard fork, right? So we're not talking. Is that right?
That is the example of which the discussion is based on. Yes, this is currently an idea. Whether it's good or not is irrelevant for now. But what the actual question is,
what's the process?
What's the process?
Okay. Right. Well, I mean, this is a change to the ledger specification, right? Because the reward formula is part of the ledger specification. So it's part of, so then the question generalizes to what is the process for, making a change in future? What is the process for making a change to the ledger specification? And then that being, enacted, and of course all the implementations agreeing, etc. And a hard fork taking place.
And what I remember from the TSC meeting 2 weeks ago, when I was not yet on vacation, was that we somewhat discussed what the TSC should be responsible for. And I think the specification of the ledger could be something that was us and not Cardano node specifically, or an implementation. So organizing the standard, the spec could be something that the TSC could be responsible for, and thus such requests as L would be best situated or placed within the TSC. Similarly, how the parameter committee organizes parameter changes through the PCB process, we could have a similar, probably more open forum thread process for suggestions to the specifications, suggestions for changes to the specifications. Apologies.
I would have thought that this was the problem statement change proposal method would be a good starting point for this, right? So they should be making a problem statement as to why the ledger needs to change, right? There in that problem statement, they could explain the advantages and disadvantages of the approaches, right? They could then put together an improvement proposal that suggests a solution that we can gather community opinions on. And at a point when there's something a bit more concrete, someone's going to have to make a strong evaluation of it. Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt. It's my understanding that there is already a SIP here, SIP 50.
Okay. There is already a SIP.
Introduced in 2022. I don't know if it's still the same content, but it was from Michael Lesson. Hang on, I'll get it.
So I'm trying to work out what we're being, in the sense that I can see that the TSC has a role to make sure that these changes are stable and make the system, to evaluate the likely effects on things. But in order to do that, we can't just. I'm just trying to work. Are they? Yeah. I'm not trying to ask how to get it started, or what?
It's kind of interesting because it links in with the existing sort of roadmap item of potential improvements to the reward scheme. And that's part of the roadmap for 2025 and was already being covered in some proposals that are currently up for vote on chain as a project to be completed. So I suppose it gets lumped in along with that. And there was a presentation in the last SPO meeting from another group of various different suggestions on how to improve the reward scheme for SPOs. So I suppose it becomes part of that whole process of how to improve overall reward scheme for SPOs. But this is a specific one that seems to have existed from 2022 onwards, and I think someone's just pushing the issue now that this is coming in to focus.
So are we? What is the? Their ask is how do they progress? How do we feel about? How would we, given that this is something that affects the whole community, right? Obviously, we would like to have. I suggest that we would like to have some control over it not being completely egregious, right? But at the same token, we need to. How do we socialize this and get some sort of consensus, human consensus? Is what I'm trying to work out at this point. Is that our role to do that or not?
It may be, just an opinion, it may be under the role of the proposal that went forward to cover this piece of work in the roadmap. So that would be something to pass along to them and make sure it's in the discussion, however it is they're going to socialize it. I think it might have been part of the IOE proposal, but don't quote me on that. I'm just going to go check the original proposal.
Nicholas?
I was thinking about the way we did it when we proposed the Paras upgrade of Ouroboros and what we are doing also with Laos. And in both cases, I agree with you, Neil. We went through building a CPS to explain why such change will be valuable, and then we worked on the CIP on Paras, and we will work on the CIP on Laos as well. And I think it's a good first step, and then we can probably go a bit deeper and see if the TSC wants to participate to the CIP discussion, if we want to provide some guidance afterwards, but asking to go through a CPS and CIP process to begin with sounds to me like a pretty good approach, actually.
Duncan?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think it's very much within our scope, the TSC, to have an opinion about it, not necessarily to directly evaluate or directly take part, but to make sure that appropriate steps are taken. So CIP, CPS is the obvious things, but I mean for reward systems, it's a particular part of the the ledger where we might say additional things. We want to see this or that kind of analysis, particularly because I mean my own experience is whenever you tweak the anything to do with the rewards, you have to be very careful and do the kind of proper game theory analysis, because it's easy to to have unintended consequences. It's an area a bit like cryptography where you don't really want to, well, you want expert opinions. So it's not necessarily for us to have those expert opinions, but to make sure that the right kind of analysis is done and that is shared with the community, and then everyone can have an opinion on it and blah blah blah. But
so Duncan, you're saying the TSC should take the role of ensuring the correct steps are taken.
Yeah, which for the reward area might be slightly different to other parts of the ledger, for example. Yeah.
Ben?
I was just going to say, I feel like community validation is one of our biggest problems, and I don't know, how can I put this? I don't know that we should necessarily be responsible for validation beyond the DREPs. And by that I mean, if in this case it's the SPOs, if you're going to make a big change that's going to impact the SPOs, I would like to see you providing a study that you've done with the SPOs, essentially, about how this is going to impact their bottom line and what their approval rating of it is already. I recognize that puts the proposer in a bit of a set of perhaps tainted motivations, but I also don't think it should be on us to go to all of these stakeholder groups individually. I think we should front load it on the people who are going to receive the funds to validate this out.
Alex, did you want to have a quick rejoinder to that?
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, Sebastian, for jumping in. Ben, do you see the SPOs in this case important because it is about the reward formula, or because it is about a fork?
Both.
Because that thing was always also a bit unclear for me. DREPs don't have any say in a hard fork whatsoever. The SPOs anyway can do whatever they want, but the whole governance section is somewhat irrelevant when we're talking about ledger changes or hard forks in particular.
I think it's a good point.
But Sebastian.
Yeah, I wanted to just highlight SIP 84, which is actually speaking about how the ledger can and should be changed within SIPs and so on, as well already said. And specifically, I think there's even exactly what Duncan said, that a ledger SIP, if it's about the kind of reward stuff, an incentive area, right, should be accompanied with some kind of analysis, right, going into an expert opinion of the game theoretic aspects of it. It specifically says that there in this, what I just put into the chat. And I think our response could be, yes, if we want to change. So these parameter changes as maybe surfaced, okay, this is a ledger change. Here is a process. Seems to be still good. 84, SIP 84 is what you need to do about changing the ledger. In this case, it would be, I guess, a soft fork, which is not changing validity, but changing the rules. And following that process is something I think we can just ask and maybe review even that it's followed, but maybe not doing that. And I think this is what everybody said so far. And a brief notion too on top is there is no requirement for a CPS if you have concrete improvement proposal, right? You can have a rational motivation in itself. You don't need both. But so the response here, I would say, is there a SIP? If yes, does it follow the process? We can maybe have a look and kind of say, okay, a review, that looks good, or we can maybe push it ahead and endorse it maybe a bit. I'm not sure what role we'll definitely take, but I think hinting people on this is how we change the ledger and following good practice, I think, is a good stance.
Neil, you're muted.
Thank you. That was me talking for you, wondering why you weren't responding, Duncan. Off you go, Duncan.
I was just responding to something somebody said earlier. I'm sorry, I forgot who said it already. But I just want to just remind us ourselves that the reward scheme is not really for SPOs. They are, of course, extremely affected by it. They have strong opinions about it. They should be consulted. It has to work for them. But the rewards formula is, the whole reward scheme is for the benefit of ADA holders, not for SPOs. It indirectly has to work for them and it has to benefit them. But, when we just need to make sure, when we're getting, expert opinion and polling for, are people happy with it? Yes, SPO opinion is extremely important, but it's not the, it's not the final say, and it's not the be all and end all. That's the other.
Yeah.
Important
I mean, I think the TSC is partially responsible for sustainability here, and getting this wrong could affect the sustainability of the whole Cardano ecosystem badly. Yes, is one way of it we could view this.
Yeah, because in some sense, like SPO's interests and ADA holders' interests are not exactly the same, and the whole point of the design of the reward scheme is to try and align them. But if you design it wrong, you can end up, misaligning them. And they're not the same people, they're not the same group. There's an overlap, but they're not the same group. So anyway, that's just something to bear in mind, because I'm sure SPOs do have strong opinions, and they're much more expert about it than many other people. So so when we provide, it, in the end, as you say, like DREPs have to vote on it, but they have to be given an informed opinion. They have to have the information on which to base their decisions, and we need to make sure they have that information.
Johnny?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that SIP 50, I believe, is the first introduction of the L parameter for discussion. So for anybody watching, they can review that for more information on what its effect would be. Also, I just reread the IOE proposal and can confirm that one of the items is the revised stake pool incentive scheme, investigate and evaluate potential adjustments to the SPO incentive scheme, focusing on improving viability fairness for smaller pools by considering existing proposals and analyzing cost and benefits, aiming to enhance decentralization and ecosystem health in collaboration with Obsidian Systems. I don't know if that will have changed, but that's what is on the proposal. So there is some context here that they have put that forward as a work item. It has been approved, and I believe it would be under the purview of IOE to sort of gather up all of the different proposals and work with them.
So, I mean, is that sort of maybe what? Okay, so we're sort of to summarize. Oh, sorry, Duncan. Yes, sorry, Mr. Suter.
I guess I was looking to try to summarize.
Yeah, that was what I was going to try to do as well.
Yeah. So it sounds, I mean, from what we've seen, let me get, the question was guidance on how to make a change like this. And it seems that the first thing that we're saying is that we want to see a SIP or a CPS,
Right,
which it appears there's one that exists, but we question if it's very out of date, given that it was written in 2002. Has it changed significantly? And
2022. Cardano.
Sorry, 2022.
Non-existent. Neither was Bitcoin in 2002.
Yes. So we want to see that. It seems, and anyone jump in if you disagree with this, that the TSC's role in this would be to look at the SIP and the CPS and advise on, does it have sufficient analysis? Is there anything else that should be done to help guide the community when looking at this? Is that and then finally, it's something that we are, given the budget for IOE has passed with this in, we are asking and requesting that IOE then manage this from a practical perspective going forward. Is that a fair summary? Does anyone challenge any of that?
Can I just say, I think I think the TSC plays two roles. One is to make sure that we would like to see the set of analyses that were going to be performed, so that we knew that they were covering the items we felt had to be covered. And at the end of it, we would like to be able to review them just for their technical integrity, or whatever the right words might be. And we would expect what am I looking for? A good economic, good, but the word is not good, a fulsome evaluation of the effects economically, as well as on decentralization, because it will change the number of pools.
When is the TSC taking action, though, then? What is the trigger for the TSC to provide their expertise or step into organizing action regarding ledger specification, change organization, or whatnot?
So I think what we're saying here is that this is, we are assuming that this work has already been bid for, right, in the IOE proposal. What we would want to do as part of the milestones in that IOE proposal, ensure that the appropriate artifacts are being generated, and that those artifacts were appropriately reviewed. And then, that having done, there should be a concrete proposal that the TSC could get its weight behind.
Proposal as in CIP?
Well, the point is, there would have to be a proposal for a definite change to the ledger. Yes. Effectively, it becomes a PR against the ledger at some point. Yes.
Yes. So a CIP, right? So a CIP changing the ledger, which has in its path to active adoption by the implementations used on the network.
And then once the implementation started, it was decided the implementation could have put in, because this is where, we now have several gatekeepers. The implementations would have agreed to put it in, whoever's managing that. And then the SPOs would have to agree to the hard fork occurring.
But how do we go from SIP, which we now have written since 2022, into ledger? There needs to be a PR somewhere. Somebody needs to write that, yes. There can be contracts that writes.
This is why I'm saying I believe it comes under IOE purview, because they are specifically doing revised reward scheme as a part of their proposal. Then they would have to touch on this work as a part of that, and determine what ledger changes may need to be put into effect, or at least socialize the discussion as a part of their work, and get consensus from the DREPs, etc. Either on chain or off chain, depending on what procedure we're using that day. But yeah, so it's definitely already scoped for as work. And I think we can't exclude. It would be great if Ricky was here, but of course he can't be. He may have had a view on how this might have worked out.
I'm conscious of time here.
I was going to suggest
to take an action that is to go to Ricky and IOE to say,
or any other IOE representative who would cover this, or Obsidian Systems, who are named as the.
So can I suggest that what we do as an action is we ask Duncan S to approach IOE to comment on this agenda item, and to confirm or deny whether it's in the scope of their work. Duncan?
Can I suggest as an additional thing that we consider, as the TSC, we consider this again in future, as part of the scope question, like what is the role of the TSC in this? Because I think, you know, there's the concrete example, but the general case that Alex is raising here is an interesting question, and I think the answer is not entirely clear. And I think we could think about it and try and help clarify that. Like, what is the role of the TSC in pushing along or being a gatekeeper or whatever in
we're currently saying that we see
in
some
proposed changes to the ledger. Or
With the example of L, it might be by chance clear because there is a SIP and there is an IOE budget proposal already.
Yeah.
But the general question is still very muddy for me. How do we get from SIP to ledger specification change? And I see a big role that the TSC, or a chance, opportunity for the TSC to provide extraordinary value to that translation and organization.
Well, it's interesting because I think any future change like that is significant enough to be part of a future roadmap, right? So it might fall into the next roadmap discussion and scoping any specific ledger parameter introduction, for example, rather than just a simple change. A simple change already has a system whereby people can put forward a proposal to change it, and there are guardrails. But if there's something that's wholly newly introduced, then it would, in my opinion, it would need to form part of a future roadmap. But Neil, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I think the issue about it being in a roadmap is one that has to be, but we're now into is this a product that, is this a variation on a product that people need, etc. So I'm going to suggest that we curtail it now. I think we've got two good actions. One is we go back and see if this particular one is covered by IOE. And the second one is the general scope that we have to talk about our role in this is it a fundamental change? It is a significant change.
The effect is to change K's influence on what saturation is, and it changes it to leverage based, and it's very different. Yeah, so I think it's a significant change in this individual case.
To the operational behavior, potential operational behavior, and the sustainability question. And therefore, we need to work out as a TSC how much involvement we think we should have in that process and whether the community agrees with this. Right? I think Mr. C is nodding, so I think we managed to summarize that reasonably. Shall we go back to point number one, given that Sam has joined?
Absolutely.
Mr. Leathers, would you like to talk us through the point, please?
Yes, sure. So basically, we currently have the release meeting. It's typically just been the team leads and me, and we're trying to decentralize this a bit. So we were hoping we could spin up a working group underneath the TSC and get some community involvement, specifically Adam Dean went through the OSC maintainer retainer program, so we think he would be a perfect fit for participating in the release process and ideally getting some funding for doing so after we get budgets taken care of through the OSC budget. Yeah, so that's my general proposal. I'd like to keep it same time on Tuesdays. That would be 11 plus 4, that'd be 1500 UTC on Tuesdays, and we basically just get together and talk about the Haskell node release process, where things are going, when things are coming out. Yeah, so how do you guys feel about that?
Can I just to help people, so to clarify, this meeting effectively is the short-term roadmap of the node, right? So it has visibility of, there are things that are sort of just beyond the horizon, are being planned and being built. So it's coming out of, it's the sort of tail end of the delivery process of, from things. And therefore it becoming public, right? Because currently it's not done publicly. It becoming public would reveal short-term plans, yes. And would also, would permit us to see that deliveries are occurring. It's effectively a proof point in delivery process from the people who have got the money to build things. Am I all of this reasonable so far? Yeah. And what do you think the TSC would bring, or the TSC or the product committee or people? What's the output to the community from this process?
So the output basically is the node releases and the release notes that come from them.
Right.
So every 2 to 6 weeks, depending on how much stuff is being integrated, basically we have a release going out to the community, and this basically would just move the communication within Intersect rather than have it internal to IOG.
Okay. Johnny.
I'm in favor of anything that opens up more transparency on what's actually happening on any part of the Cardano ecosystem. Personally, I'd like to request, if possible, these things to be published on YouTube as well for asynchronous watching, if possible. I'm not sure. Neil's
that one's tricky because sometimes we discuss sensitive security issues related to the release.
Okay, so there would be an edit requirement if that was to happen. Okay. I'm just conscious of the recent discussion around previous versions and changes on nodes back in the day. And I do like the idea of people being able to get under the hood in advance and know what's going to change, especially in the case of an upcoming hard fork, like what potential things are happening. So I'm happy with this move, personally. Yeah, good to hear.
In terms of ownership,
sorry, Duncan.
So there's a ton of people with hands up here. I'll wait.
Sebastian, let's see if we can.
Yep. So I just want to maybe point out there 2 to 6 weeks sounds like also a similar cadence as we kind of started to kind of have more maybe very brief show and tells between people working on multiple node developments. So maybe more of a kind of cross-pollinating demo session. Just want to say this is also kind of now starting to exist, and maybe this could interact.
Definitely don't want demos in this call. That would be a separate group.
Yeah. So I don't want to suggest it as an alternative. Rather say this also exists, and would be great to kind of, if there is just recently a cut release from the Haskell Cardano node, right? Having a 5-minute demo of what one new feature, which this one does in that context, would kind of serve a similar purpose of kind of socializing the latest release or kind of the upcoming release or one thing, right? This is more like maybe an excerpt of this. And if these find footing, I would say, it's not sure yet, right? These kinds of sessions, would love to see also from the Haskell node implementation, the reference node implementation also be kind of present in the show and tell across node implementations, node diversity. I just shared a link of a forum post where Arnaud is kind of looking for the next date to have. It's also projected to be like every 1.5 months roughly, right? So share recent developments, maybe some challenges encountered, or just quick 5-minute.
Looking for input into that process to come out of this activity. That seems reasonable, yes. Duncan, Mr. C.
I would wholeheartedly endorse Sam's proposal. Is this something we need to vote on? If so, should we do so?
Yes, and I think we acknowledge the fact that it's unlikely to be recorded live because that's going to. I would suggest we don't need a report back is sufficient, not a live recording, because from history, sometimes people have to have very serious discussions in these meetings, which we don't wish to even have a recording of it. So I'm just saying we would look to whoever's represent. We'd look to have some sort of recording and maybe a feedback into the emergent properties of it into a node diversity or something like that approach. Right. With that as the general gist, does anybody object to that? I'm going to take no dissent as agreement because it's quicker, and we hope that Adam is, having been mentioned, is actually willing to do this, and we should check with him. Okay.
Yep.
I will let Mr. Sutar catch up, and then we'll move on to the next item.
Can
I can send Duncan a list of all the people that are currently on the meeting invite, and then he can create the new meeting invite, and we can delete the old one. I think that would be the next steps here.
Okay, let's do that.
Grand.
So it become the so the first step is Intersect takes over the meeting invite.
Yep.
Johnny, just quickly.
Yeah, just for final understanding. So I may have misinterpreted opening up the meeting, which is why I went to YouTube recordings. Opening up the meeting in this case means opening up to someone outside of IOG, i.e. a technical steering committee member in the form of Adam, not a publicly open meeting.
Yes, it is not intended. I think that's the first step, at least. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mistake. I went straight to the end.
No, I think the public would be too far as a first step. Right.
Understood. Yeah. Still no dissent, because any opening up of more transparency is good.
Mr. Sutar.
I would suggest just leaving it to the subcommittee to decide initially, like what level of, how to report it initially, and then we can always refine it later.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny just asked my question about the level of openness. So this isn't going to be posted on Discord with an open invite. Yeah. Okay then.
No.
We want public minutes, but we don't want public discussion.
I think that's the decision then. Do you want to move on? Is there anything else?
Does anybody wish to change that? If not, we will move on. I think, was it item 2? Did we discuss item 2? We discussed item 1. Did we do item 2?
Yes,
Sam was item 3, sorry. Right, we've done 4. I thought for some reason when I saw the agenda, Sam was 1 on the agenda. Right. 4. What's 5?
On that one.
5 is...
I think it's me again. The quick one though. Kevin has prepared the metadata for the governance action change to increase the Plutus mem limits. We're discussing that extensively in the perimeter committee as well. And the Security Council sees no issues. That's what I can relay from Kevin. Yes, please. So Christian was first.
Yep. Just wanted to clarify from the Security Council, because Kevin wanted me to speak to it. The only things they saw was the block adoption time and block forging time, but they have conservative viewpoints on the implementation. So the Security Council's viewpoint is there is no security concerns at this time. I put a little note in there. You can copy and paste to Duncan.
Christian, can I just confirm that? So the Security Council saw this as being suitably conservative, is what you're saying, as a change.
In their traditional views, yes.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just making sure. Right. Okay. I mean, because you could, context. Sebastian.
I would like to have some context. Security Council and Parameter Committee, how are they evaluating changes like these?
Okay, the parameter committee basically used benchmarking and other techniques to work out the potential change to the time to adopt blocks at a time, because it's not changing, and it's not changing the size of anything. It's just the time to adopt. So this was done through micro benchmarking and through using the testbed to see the delta between the numbers. Okay. The Security Council was basically being asked for their opinion that given that information, did they agree with the parameter committee that there should be no significant...
And the Security Council...
Go on, Christian.
Sorry, and I was just going to highlight the Security Council, even though I can't reveal them, has senior leadership from IOE, TWIG, CF, and then one community person. So they discussed it. It's the same thing.
It's a hidden council.
Oh, if this is going to be
about
public recording, don't want to specifically call out who they are. To get harassed.
Okay. Yeah, good. I understood benchmarking of individual code changes or the process itself, Cardano node, and maybe also in a networked setup, or more of a.
Oh yeah,
small.
I can tell you exactly precisely how this was done, right? Because basically, before my ejection, I was managing this process. So basically, the micro benchmarks were initially done to work out whether it was worth putting them on the cluster. The cluster is 50 distributed machines, distributed physically, running effectively a standard code set in which regression testing is performed against this. So the change was made, a regression test was looked for, and basically what was seen was a small and expected change in the adoption times of we're talking a few milliseconds here in the and on that basis, given that it would only increase the end-to-end propagation times by a small amount, it was not likely. There was no foreseen issue against things like the time to propagate and the other changes. Okay, so it was all done in a methodical way, as all of the changes have been done over the years. Okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to get an understanding of what's employed there currently. Thanks.
Okay, so we're coming up towards the end, at the bottom of the hour when we normally would have ended. When do we normally end? About 1 o'clock?
Half past, usually.
Half past, right. So should we scroll down? Because I think, Mr. Suter?
Can I just check? There's no decision to be made at this stage, but is there a follow-up action on this, or is this just information for the? We look forward to the. We look forward to the total text. I mean, I think so. The key point is the TSC is apparently the body that approves these things being put on chain. So I think that when we look forward to the text, final text, and so that we can have an offline vote for it being.
I think what's relevant here is that the TSC is formally the one that submits the governance action.
Yes. So basically, we review the proposal, to release the governance action, or to whatever the right word is, to cause the governance action to start being enabled. Because the intersect has the 100K ADA and the mechanism for putting for paying in the deposit on the governance action. Right? And we've already in past meetings approved the process. We just need to rubber stamp the final text. So we can do that offline, I would suggest. We don't need to bring it back to this meeting.
Thanks for the clarification. The next thing that we had was decreasing committee min size proposal that was shared last week.
My understanding, please correct me if I'm incorrect, was this was sort of partially driven because people didn't see enough people. Was this to do with the lack of people standing for the ICC?
Yes.
Am I confused? No.
There was the trigger for Thomas Lindsat to suggest.
But my understanding is that there are now more proposals, like 9 for 7 seats. So the idea that the committee size wouldn't. I mean, is this still relevant? A, I'm trying to work out whether this is relevant, or has the condition for it disappeared? And B, if do we need to consider it? That's what I'm trying to basically say at this point.
Okay, so there's a lot of feedback that's been given asynchronously, which I can pass all over to Thomas, and at the same time ask if this question is still relevant if they're looking to increase the size of the committee, which I wasn't aware
No,
of.
they're looking to decrease it from 7 to 5.
They were looking to.
So
they were looking to. My understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, because they were looking to decrease it from 7 to 5 because only 5 people were standing. But my understanding is there's now 9 people standing or something like that. So that actually,
a few of the submissions for candidacy seem to be trolling, potentially, just false names or humorous names or comedy names. Now, it's possible that they're actually going to stand forward and try to be comedy named members, but I'm not sure. But yes, it has increased the amount of applications, but the original suggestion was reducing it from 7 to 5. And part of the reasoning for why that's okay is because there's so much context.
Oh yeah, well, but isn't this the point that some of these committees are not individuals anymore? They're actually subcommittees, or they're committees of people.
They never have been individuals. So the way it started was there was 3 pre-installed entities, CF, Emergo, and IOG, with the first year of interim constitutional committee. The governance parameters working group that I was a part of expressed the concern that we wanted a balance of community over existing entities, so we went for a 7 as an initial setting, so that there would be 4 community seats over 3 previously foundational seats. That led to Intersect being introduced as another pre-installed seat with its own internal voting process for getting community representation from the Intersect seat. But now that IOG has explicitly said they're going to step down, and Intersect has explicitly said they're going to step down, there's a potential for reducing the balance there, because you're now no longer trying to counterbalance 3 founding entities or this or that. So that's part of it. And another part of the actual proposal itself was they're worried about deadlock happening in governance, because if people don't participate in the committee, then you might not get to a ratified action if people don't all participate. Now, from historical context, I think there hasn't been, with the existing 7 seats, there hasn't been a scenario where they haven't got their opinions in on time. But I think it's just a concern that they might not get their opinions in on time if they're moving away from the pre-installed foundational seats and into all community. I think it's just an abundance of caution in the proposal to say, like, we want to avoid deadlock.
Okay, but I think
personally, I would stick with 7. But I would not want to stand in the way of any proposal to reduce.
There's a hazard they're worried about. If the hazard matures, we're going to have to obviously revisit it. Yes, but I would. I'm trying to work. The point is that I must admit the motivation for this, why we should even think about this at this point, seems to be extremely confused.
Yeah, the concern over the amount of applicants is I think the original reaction. Sure. And then further to that, the concern of if you don't get enough, then you might not be able to continue governance because you haven't filled the seats. And further to that, even if you do fill the seats, there's a potential with that many people that not everyone will get in their decision on time. So these are the concerns. But I think we've proven that with 7 in place, they haven't missed the deadline so far.
Could I suggest? Alex, do you want a last comment and then we'll close?
Yes, I think it's again. Sorry for coming back to it. It's a bit of a process question, but this is an existing parameter that is proposed to be changed, and the whole reason of the parameter committee
is to do this. Is to
do precisely this, and there's a process for that. And that this comes to the TSC, fantastic. There's lots of valuable context and opinions and knowledge in here that is relevant. But I think it's not an item that we should discuss here.
Okay, so
can I agree it's maybe not the priority at the moment, but the reason that this was brought to us is that before submitting anything formally, the proposer, Thomas, was keen to understand and get stakeholder sentiment ahead of time. So this was really just a temperature check to see if the TSC might be sympathetic to moving the parameter down. And it's worth remembering that although the parameter committee makes recommendations, it is up to the TSC to ratify those. So that's why it's come here.
Johnny?
Yeah, and I'll just, for the sake of the recording, add some context from the guardrails from the Constitution itself. This one, for changing the minimum committee size, actually says that it needs a 3-month consultation period in public before it can be changed. So this would be, if people wanted to socialize this and have a discussion with the DREPs and things like that, this would be the time to start that 3-month window. And the range is a minimum of 3, a maximum of 10, and it must not be negative. And those are the only guardrails that exist in the Constitution on this parameter. So it can be put up, but it's possible that if it was put up now, because it hasn't had that 3-month consultation process, it might be deemed unconstitutional by any existing constitutional committee member. I can't speak for their decision. I can only highlight what's in the Constitution.
Not having enough elected or members to put themselves up for CC would count, though, as emergency situation, which would override some of those rules.
Indeed. Although we haven't got an emergency situation defined in the Constitution as far as I'm aware and how to deal with that if it does occur. But yes, your point is valid.
My understanding is there's a general clause about emergencies in the Constitution somewhere. Anyway, shall we just say, if this person wishes to do this, they should A, approach the parameter committee, and B, start a 3-month consultation.
That's what's happening. He was invited to this Thursday's parameter committee call to present the case. He's invited to write a PCP, and he can still get context or feedback from TSC.
But in terms, we do not see this as needing any emergency action at this point, which would be the only reason the TSC should get involved earlier upfront, I would suggest.
I would take the position the TSC has no ability to block it. So why would we be discussed? Why would we discuss it? It's interesting that it came in, but yeah.
Okay.
I have no objection to it ending up on chain, is my point.
Yeah, well, agreed. With that said, as far as I can see, item 7, right? We don't have any input. Neither Adam's not here, and Duncan has already apologized for not writing. Item 8 is we would have wished to. We can't discuss that really without Ricky at this point. And item 9 is okay. Is it Duncan? I assume that's telling us people put their thoughts down on paper, please, so we can have a discussion. Yeah.
Absolutely. What we're going to be doing is I've spoken with Lorenzo, who has been working with or is going to be working with all the other committees and helping shape and make sure we properly define remit. And next Wednesday, I was going to propose that we have the session be exclusively a workshop on defining remit. And so we will share the Miro board ahead of time, and as well as any, the agenda that we want to cover, how we want to focus on that, so that we can use the time effectively and hopefully
could we
give ourselves something we can take to the board.
Right. So, but if that's the case, are the items 7 and 8, which we've passed over today, do we need to? So, item 7. Do we put them on the agenda for next week as well as that, or do we want to literally just postpone items 7 and 8 for 2 weeks?
So item 7, I think we can deal with asynchronously. It's asking Adam and Duncan to write up literally a paragraph explaining their views on the KES agent adoption. That's something that can be reviewed by this group and okayed for release in the Slack channel. And then the maintenance contract, I'll take an action that between Matt Davis and I, we can ask for some clarification from Intersect on how that's to be managed.
Okay. With that all being said, is there any other business? If not, we will conclude the public portion of this meeting, and voting representatives are welcome to come and have a little get together in the other channel. Thank you for your time, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you.
Cheers, folks.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thanks, Duncan.
Bye.